every single step of our way. I do have a question for you. How many of you here are either a queen or a king? I see a few of you. Okay, I like that. Well, for the ones that didn't raise their hand, I'm going to explain what I mean with this question. If you actually get this book and if you look into it, Country Living, that we have it outside, it does says that if you have a piece of land and a humble home, you are queens and kings.
Amen.
So I'm sure that we can all reach that status. Now, why we're here today is that we want to learn what to do when we become kings and queens. And that's why I like to invite Ron to come up front and to introduce us to the practical aspect of being kings and queens on our lands.
Amen. Amen.
I think I ought to turn this over to you. Okay, what's this? Believe me, I work with dirt. Oh, and that'll put that up there so they can see it here. Okay. Yes. Well, surely I'm not going to be the only one watching this. All right. Why homestead? What in the world is homesteading? Come on, this is a classroom. What is homesteading? I asked in my last discussion with you folks, why is there such a craze or an interest? I mean, when I did this years ago, my goodness, I was looked at as I was a nut job. Well, I am, I'll just tell you that. And I tell my children that I like being a nut job. My children kind of felt like, Dad, we are really weird. I said, yes, and thank the Lord. So, why is there such an interest in the subject of homesteading? Why homestead?
Independent.
To be self-sufficient, to be independent.
Raise our children.
Oh, there's a lot of reasons for doing it.
They're in the book Country Living, a lot of them are.
Yes. I'm going to tell you something. I didn't even know that book existed, and it was a number of years ago. I wasn't raised this way. I was raised in a city. I knew nothing but trouble. And every once in a while, we get to go out to our grandparents' place. And my grandmother knew how to grow anything. That was really the beginning of my experience of learning to grow food. I knew nothing about it. Believe me, I was just a city boy. Had no idea, and that little book somewhere along the way came into my hands, and I read it, and I said, oh my. So if you've never read it, I want to challenge all of you to get that little book out there on the table and read it. And not just to read it, but take it to heart, because it really doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's just good old-fashioned good counsel. And it's really helpful. So, homesteading. Why do you all have an interest in homesteading? This is a class now, please.
Because we know the day is coming when we can't buy, sell, or trade, or protect those who keep God's commandments.
Also,
That's a good reason.
we can keep the Sabbath without being bothered by the people around us.
Time to come, we're gonna buy or sell.
Well, I don't know if all of us are Bible-believing people in here, and it doesn't I guess I should be just blunt. It doesn't matter to me. I do think it does matter to the Lord, but if you're not a Bible-believing person, you still be benefited by homesteading, is what I'm saying.
You wanna get out and see?
Now, there's a lot of reasons why, and one of the things I want to stress to all of you, most of the folks that I've met, when I started this years ago, I barely gave you a little bit of my experience. I was in private practice in North Carolina, in alternative medicine, and had a growing, thriving practice. I was facing a lot of money, and I was going to become very wealthy, and I would have been lost, and my children would have been totally lost, and who knows where I'd be today. Because it was all sitting right in my lap. And I became very convicted that I needed to take my family out of this environment. And I took them out of that environment, and it was a stepping stone that took us to the place where we have been for a number of years. And we started trying to learn more about living, well, honestly, I told you a little bit, and I'm trying to skip it because I don't really want to talk a lot about it, but I learned a lot about what I'm doing now when I was back in my hippie years. I learned about living on the land, growing food, living more self-sufficient, and what all that kind of meant. So I don't know what it means to you when I look at the word homesteading, something happens in this brain right here. It may not be happening in your brain, so I'm just curious. I want your input. What's your interest in homesteading? Because we're going to look at just a number of things, and it won't be tonight. It'll be tomorrow. We're going to travel really quick through a few things and through what I call the foundational principles of homesteading. And there's 3 different areas of homesteading that we have to get really good and acquainted with. You don't want to leave the city and move to a village and then move to the country without being prepared. Do you know what I mean? There may be some in this room that are already out in the country and they're already, working in that direction. And believe me, if you have been given a little time, which I believe we've been given, just a little time, you need to get yourself acquainted with what kind of home structure you're going to have. And we're going to look at that tomorrow because it's very important. There's homes that are being built today by people that are totally, absolutely inefficient. We're going to look at that. Because when I think homesteading, I think completely off-grid. That means no more attachment to Big Brother. Do you know what that means? Right there. It means your water. It means your food source.
One problem that we have the water.
That's how serious it is. How are we going to live? I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about homesteading. I've never really done a lecture on it, so I'm having quite a time with this. It's just been a part of our life. And I find a lot of folks that are interested in homesteading that they want to go from there to there, but bring that with them. Not going to work, folks. If there was ever time to be converted, and I'm not just talking about into Christ, but in our brains, we have to think differently. We have had generations of people educated to be dependent on the system. I mean, so dependent that everything that we do, why homestead? Why do you really want to homestead? It's going to take some rolling up of some sleeves, men, women, and children. and a lot of soul searching to be determined to stick with it. It's a tough life, and I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't realize how tough it was. I was a skinny boy when I went to the farm, and I gained a lot of muscle weight, and I started eating calories you cannot believe, just to keep up with the work that was on a homestead. So, why homestead?
You want to eat healthy food.
Is that a question?
They want good, healthy food.
I think I'd like to know about homesteading because I'd like to know what's the priority, in homesteading, what should you do first? And so that you can do things in an organized fashion.
The three things, and you'll see it up there on the board, is your housing, your water supply, and your food supply. My personal experience, and this is not to be mean or chastising to anybody, but I'm just going to tell you the bare facts. When I first went to the land and left all that behind, I had a lot of background of homesteading when I was in the hippie movement. I went to Central America, and I was living back in the jungle. You didn't have Walmart. You didn't have Kroger's. You didn't have supermarkets. You didn't have nothing but you and the great big outdoors. And at that time, I didn't really have Jesus. While I was down there, I was introduced to Jesus. And it really became an experience. So that started my life in homesteading. And so when I think of homesteading, I think of those three areas. What kind of home structure? Your house, your shelter is going to be, and everything that deals with that. And then your water, an independent source of water. If you get to the place where the system collapses, which it very well could, sooner than we believe, you've got to have a source of independent water. I don't know how soon it's going to fall apart. Frankly, I hope it doesn't. I don't like the idea of that, do you? But the way things are going, the potential of it doing that is very real. In fact, we're being told very clearly it's called the Great Reset. Anybody in this room heard of that word? Yeah, own nothing and be happy. I doubt that. If you're a true blue American, that's not going to go over real well. And like I said, you're not going to have Walmart to go down there and to go get your salad material. The food source has got to come off the land that you have or you have access to. And it's all got to become independent. So that kind of concept of homesteading is going to take some time to get your head wrapped around. Because as American people, we are soft. We're very soft and we're very spoiled. Our interest in our head may not be the interest of our body. You know what I'm saying? So if you're not used to exercising, I suggest you get to exercising. Do you understand what I'm saying? Homesteading is a whole lifestyle. And if you want to hurt for the first X amount of months, don't prepare. Because it will. It'll put you in shape, it'll either kill you or cure you. So, when we talk about homesteading, I believe there's a purpose in homesteading, and that's to find that independence. You know, whether the close of all things come, which it looks like it could happen, and I don't want to talk a bunch of propaganda here, but I'm just telling you, there's too much talk going on universally. There's too much talk about universal one world system, where all nations come into harmony for a reason. And we've got to learn to be a little more independent. You know, years ago, let's say nothing happens, or the end of the world doesn't happen, and we have to be here. Do you know what happened in the 30s in this country? In fact, it happened in other countries as well. Why? I mean, a lot of you are too young. I'm too young. I wasn't there. And maybe none of us were there in the sense of our age. But you go back and read of the Great Roaring 20s. What was going on in the Great Roaring 20s? You know what was going on? The very same thing that's going on right now. Phony baloney money was coming into existence, and people were being convinced it was the true monetary system. We were taken off the gold standard. And as soon as that started happening, there became this working of controlling you. It got people into the mindset the way you get something is go get in debt. The bank is more than willing to get you to borrow and borrow and borrow for the purpose of controlling you. In the Great Roaring 20s, go back and read and study about it. The mindset of the people were, wow, everything is going great. Anybody heard about the ugly monster called inflation? How tough is it, brethren and friends, when your income and your outgo is getting tougher and tougher, where it's harder to make it from day to day or week to week? But when the Great Depression hit, it was a collapsing of that monetary system. And everybody's monetary system that was in those banks, what happened to it? You know the people that survived that Great Depression?
They lived in the country.
They were on the farms. They were in the country. In fact, amazing thing of it is they hardly felt a depression. I have talked to some of those old-timers, a lot of them are gone now, that lived through that period. And they said, we didn't know anything about the Depression. We were always in depression. we never hardly had anything, but we always had food.
Right, they were happy.
And they were at peace with that because they did have their independence. They had their home, their shelter. They had the land. They had their water source. And they had their food supply. And they moved through the Great Depression with very little of that. They didn't have to go to the bread lines.
And they knew how to store their food and keep it fresh in the ground or whatever, in snow. And,
Amen.
wood chips or sawdust or whatever. They knew.
When we get into this discussion about food supply, we're not talking about just growing it. We're talking about knowing how, if you don't know it. Anyways, I'm going to get into that talk before I should. But we're going to talk about those things, about how to store them, how to preserve. We have lost the homestead mentality. We don't even know the first thing of how to really, a lot of us, some of us older folks may, and maybe there's some younger folks in here that have taken the effort to learn. But how to can, how to preserve, how to store it. Because I'm going to tell you something. When the next year comes, you better have enough food to put back into that ground to grow another crop of potatoes. You follow me? So we're going to discuss some of those things. Because the importance of you being able, we don't know how long this thing, let's hope it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, let's be prepared. Let's do what we can now. And the first thing you can do, get out of here. And I'm gonna lay some guilt on y'all. One of the first things y'all are gonna have to work on, get out of debt. Get out of debt, whatever it takes. Sell your fancy cars. Sell your fancy toys. Sell your fancy houses. And sell everything you possibly can sell. Get out of debt. Take what you have as excess and go find a country home or a country place. You cannot come to the country and be in debt. It will eat you alive. You know, unless we live in a computer world and you bring your computer with you. And you have an ability to work from your homestead. You know, and there's folks doing that, and I encourage that. Because it is a transition for a lot of folks. But not everybody has that ability. All right? One of the things I'm going to talk with you folks on, there's not a long, most of us are all a bunch of gray hairs in here. But to all of us, we learned when I went to homesteading, I knew when I left my private practice, I knew I was going to have to figure out some way how to make a living. I mean, that was the reality of the thing. As long as we had an economy, I wanted to somehow bring some money. And I didn't have to have all the big money anymore. You know, we took what money we have, we got completely out of debt, and we were able to go free. And when we did what we did, we went without that monkey on our back. We didn't have a whole lot, but we did have what we had, and we started out in a very humble way. And in that starting to that humble way, I was able, my wife asked me, she came to me, she says, when I said, I went to my wife and said, hey, Chris, I said, I don't want to raise our family here. I don't want to be in this environment. I don't want my children to grow up this way. I don't want them to grow up the way I grew up in the city. I want them to be out of this, and I want them to have a better life. Now, all of us are a little too young in here, I think. But there was a couple years ago that wrote articles in a book. It's called The Better Life. It was the Nearings up in Maine. And they were both highly educated people. They left their education and went to the land. They were the beginning of the Back to Lander hippie movement. These were highly educated people that said, we're done. We're done. We're done. And they went to the land, and Mr. Nearing had to create a new life for them on the land. And so one of the things we're going to look at is how to make that farm successful to where, or your land successful to where you can bring an income from it. That's exactly how we've made a living for quite a few years, is produce production. All right? And we created markets, and we won't have time this weekend to even deal with a lot of that. And I don't know if we will ever deal with it, but the possibility is there. And you can live. That's what a homestead was really all about. For years, people were living on a homestead, but they sold their excess while they were using what they needed to survive from year to year. I want to ask you, when you think of homesteading and you think of these things, where does your mind go? your home, your water, and your food production. Come on, come on. Where do you go? Where's your mind take you?
That you have to work hard to produce something.
Work's never hurt anybody. But I'm going to tell you something. When you think about where your meal's coming from, you're going to think differently. I mean, yesteryear, those homesteaders, they had it made. I mean, they really did. That's how I learned a lot that I've learned, is I went to those folks and I said, how in the world are you doing this? It was life to these people. I was a city boy. I had to learn everything. And I tell you, they taught me how to take a scythe and cut wheat. They taught me things I would have never learned anywhere else in my life. They taught me how to shock wheat and prepare it for harvest, and how to look at wheat and know when to harvest it.
That's a good class.
Yeah, I've been there. I've done some things that a lot of us know nothing about. You can read about it, or you can read the Little House on the Prairie books and watch the series, and that's a joke. Huh. It's a life, and it's a good life. But you have to mentally, right here, you got to be ready, right up here in your mind. Because you don't want to go out there and then say, you know, honey, I've had enough of this. And I go say, you know, you're going to stay here, I'm divorcing you. You think that doesn't happen? You got to be on the same page. And if you're not on the same page, pray that you do get on the same page. Because you want to work together as a team. You really do. I thank God for my wife, because she's been there with me, and I've taken her through thick and thin, let me tell you. And it's amazing. She's been right there by my side all these years. Oh, dear. So, when I think of homesteading, I think of completely living without the system. Do I now? I don't need to. Can I? Because we're set up for it. If things shut down tomorrow, I'll have electricity when y'all don't. I'll have running water when y'all don't. I'll have food supply when y'all don't. Now, do I like to go to Walmart and get bananas? You bet, because we can't raise bananas here.
If you have a greenhouse, you can.
Well, you can, but it's not real easy. So we're going to talk about some of these things. And in closing, I'm going to run you through a few pictures. And tomorrow we're going to look at them again and start discussing them a little more in detail, okay? Now, it's the big white one I'm supposed to push, right? Point there. With the white one?
Yes.
All right. That's our present home right now. All right? 1,000 square foot home. And we will discuss more about this tomorrow. But that home is totally set up off-grid. We're going to look at that, and we're going to talk about that. The importance of how to set a home up to where you can heat it right and it can be efficiently lived in. All right? One of the things I was blessed with is being a builder. I've always built our own homes, and so I build them the way I wanted them. And the building of them has always been built according to the old farmstead styles, as you can kind of see. All super components, but it's all farmstead styles, and there's a reason for that, and we will look at that. This is another home I built. That first home was for like a couple, all right? It doesn't have children. And we'll look at this one here. Again, this one is for a family. And you can build homes very efficient and well prepared for a complete collapse shutdown. Wood lot. We're going to talk about a wood lot. How much wood do you have to get yourself through a winter? What if you don't have electricity? How are you going to cook your food?
Wood stove.
Are y'all ready to start cooking on the old wood stove?
That's all.
We can talk about some of those things.
That's the only solution.
What if you can't get propane gas?
Mm-hmm. But the wood stuff is there.
Your independent source of water. Do you know how to trap your springs? Do you know how to have an independent water source? We're going to talk about those things, and we're going to talk about how to trap a spring or how to build an independent water source for your homestead. Now, this is what I really like talking about. That's your food plot. And we're going to talk about that right there, Alan, is actually what you all need to grow from year to year, to have enough food to carry you from year to year. And you're only seeing about a quarter of that field. Yeah. Not a little post-stamp garden. You might start out that way to get yourself educated, but if you're talking about independent on the soil, on the ground, you're going to have to grow enough food to take care of yourself, your wife, and your children, and even some of your neighbors. You see back over there in the corner, those are high tunnels. We're going to talk a little bit about those things as well. There's what it looks like when it's an adult in full-grown scale. There's where we are right now with that first house. This is where we are now. We've only been there 1 year. One of the things that we have done to stay out of debt is I would build a homestead, I would sell it as a homestead, and they sell like hotcakes. I'll just tell you. Right now, I never seen, when I started out in this, I went like, I mean, nobody wants something like this. And brother, I'm going to tell you, about 10, 12 years ago, things completely changed. I built 4 of these in the last 12 years. I don't know if I'm going to do it again or not. I'm just getting to the place where it's getting tougher and tougher. But that's what got us ahead financially to where we could stay completely out of debt. This is where we are now, and that's where our growing plot of food is. That's some of the things we grow on the farm. That's one of the high tunnels, the food production. That's our storage, our starting storage, our drying of garlic. We dry all of our onions, all of our garlic. We put up all of our potatoes and many other things on the homestead. That's me in one of our greenhouses growing tomatoes. We were a commercial, like I said, we were homesteading, but our farm was also a commercial farm where we were growing all organic produce. And we're going to talk about growing organically because you're going to have to, because you can't buy fertilizer. And that was one of the productions of one of the houses. I had 4 big houses that we were producing a lot of food in. There's another, that's a plot, that's a potato plot. That's about what a single couple will use in a year's period of time of just potatoes. Remember, you don't have Walmart. Think without Walmart being down the road. You overwhelmed yet? That's some of the watermelons we've grown. We just finished up maple syrup. You know, when you can't buy a sweetener, and you want a sweetener, if you're going to be producing or baking your own bread or whatever, you're going to have some kind of sweetener. And I'm going to tell you something. I used to be a beekeeper, and beekeeping is getting really rough because disease is taking over our bees because their immune system has been so weakened, they're not responding like they used to. And so I got away from beekeeping, and because the land that I was looking for, and we will talk about that tomorrow, you want to look at what resources you have on this land that you can work with and be a benefit to your homestead. We bought a piece of land that had a sugar bush on it, and so we converted the sugar bush into maple syrup. We've got 2 gallons of maple syrup right now. It takes 80 gallons of sap to make 2 gallons of syrup. We'll try to talk a little bit about that, maybe. That's our cooker. And that's other wild edibles. We'll look at some of that, some of your wild edibles. We have pawpaws on our place, and that's the upper fruit. And they're kind of like a wild banana in a sense. And I don't know if any of you have ever had pawpaws or not. Are you familiar with a custard of any kind?
Yeah.
They're kind of like a natural organic custard. Oh man, they just melt in your mouth. They are wonderful. So we have a nice big pawpaw patch on our place, enough to supply a lot of our needs. And the other is our persimmons. We have old persimmon trees that are all over our place. And you can harvest wild edibles. Yeah. All right. We'll be discussing about your independence power source. That's our solar system. And it's amazing. But I'm going to tell you something. When you start thinking off grid, you got to think how to readjust your brain when you even have solar system. You can't leave lights on. You can't leave computer burning. You can't do this. You can't do that. You've got to be more, unless you're going to spend a big, big pile of money. We're going to talk about that. I think that's it. So tomorrow, we got a full plate. And we're going to look at some of these things. And I don't want you all to get so discouraged you weird out on me. I didn't start this way, and I don't expect you all to start this way. But you have to start somewhere. You have to. It's an absolute must. And I cannot stress enough to you the joy that you have when you have that independence. You really do. It's a freedom you don't understand until you get there. It's the truth. I want to encourage y'all to come back tomorrow. You'll be forced to listen to me this more. But we're going to talk about some of these things. And like I said, we're going to put a lot out on that plate. And you probably get indigestion by the time we're done. But if we can't get through it all and don't get it all understood, maybe someday down the future we'll come back and we'll do even some more workshops on it. Because it's important. We need to know. And I hope some of you that's in this room already have some knowledge on these things. Because if you do, you need to talk. And you need to let these folks know. And you need to come together and start helping each other and teaching each other the how-tos. And tomorrow we're going to look at some of that. Some of the book material that you can use. Believe me, let me tell you something, folks. When I started this out, we didn't have computers. Do you know what I'm saying? I was in my 20s. I'm almost 70 years old now. Oh, there's computers. But there isn't like it is there wasn't like there is today. You can get on that computer now and you can find just about anything. You want to learn anything about these things? Get on that thing. Oh my goodness, you can find courses on it. You can find companies that produce tools, etc., to help the homesteader. It's one of the greatest tools we have right now
Can I say something?
for a quick
There's a-
education.
On YouTube, there's a lot of people that have moved to the country, and they're showing their experience. So some of them are not worth watching, but there's some that's on there that are very good. The people raising good children, they did almost everything off the land, and they share their experience on YouTube about it, and they do a good job. You can find some good ones to watch.
You know, Alan, we probably have a mixed group in here, and I'm going to say a few things because we do have a mixed group. There are some in here that are vegan. There's some in here who are vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian. I'm not vegan. I used to be vegan. But when I went back to the farm, oh mercy, I needed something a little extra to give me the strength and the extra calories. So I started using eggs. So we have poultry. I don't eat the chicken, but we do eat the eggs. And you know, those kind of things. But there are those that are in here that want to know about livestock. And let me tell you, I would love to talk to you about farming the land with horses. I've done it for years. And the importance of having livestock on a farm, whether you eat them or whether you just have them there, is very important for what they produce. Fertilizer. I had 15 head of draft horses on my bigger farm. I had 3 working teams. The rest were for breeding, that was part of our income, and breaking and training. Let me tell you something, folks, we had a mountain of poop that was unbelievable. But you can't, you have to have it, whether you compost it, and we'll talk about that, or whether you use it direct. You've got to have the means on that homestead. And no homestead ever was without livestock. You don't have to eat them, but you're sure going to need them.
If you can't buy and sell, how are you gonna feed your livestock?
You grow it. I grew everything, Alan, on our farm. All of our hay was all put up the old way. We had a barn that was 125 feet long with a full mound, a mow they call it. It was bigger than this room, and we put all that hay up by hand. We had all the hay we wanted. Anyways, don't get me started on all that. We raised our own oats for their oats. We raised our own wheat. We raised everything we needed, and then we bought other things like homesteads would do while we could. And so you have to learn those arts. You have to learn, and we're not going to get all that tonight or tomorrow. But I'm going to tell you something. There's not one of us too old in this room that cannot move in that direction. I'm still in the process because the one farm, that first picture you saw, we just bought that. We sold our last other farm and bought this new place. And I'm determined by the time I'm dead that I'm going to have a pair of mules. And I already have a nice big barn. And I'm going to start working the ground again with a pair of mules. At my age. Now, whether it happens or not is going to be a whole other story. But I am determined to move back to that direction. All right? So, now, anybody have any questions, input, anything before we close?
I just want to say, as you were talking, my mind went to how, when we are fertilizer, so just grow up all over the place. And we're not gonna have the, gas to put in the lawnmowers or that. We just probably have to go back to the way my dad did, old push lawnmowers that just cut.
Oh, there's all kinds of wonderful things. It builds muscle. I was a skinny boy when I went to the farm. And I'm not anymore. And I'm having a hard time trying to get skinny again. Because a lot of it turned into muscle because of the work we were doing. And a lot of muscle's good, but it better be used.
Can you speak to, I mean, a lot of this is overwhelming for people.
Yes.
Maybe you didn't grow up like you know, didn't grow up in the country, so like these skills haven't been passed down from my parents or grandparents even, or when they worked. My grandfather was a gardener, but I didn't care about gardening when I was 5. But can you speak to the importance of forming a homestead community where you
Very
are
good.
and being
Oh, I love you. You're talking my language, girl. Yes, we are going to address that. One of the things I want to stress very strongly is a homesteading community. We have lost community. In Europe, where these folks come from, community was very real. Europeans knew what community meant. In the early years of the settlement of this country, it didn't matter whether you're a Catholic, Presbyterian, Adventist, Baptist, it didn't matter. When you lived in a community of homesteads or farmsteads, when there was a need to go help a brother or a neighbor to build a barn, guess who came to help them build a barn? You know what happened when the guy next door needed help in bringing in his harvest of wheat? You know who did it? They didn't have the money to hire the locals down the way to help them. They were living on a tight budget as it was. So guess what? Farm community, homestead community meant everything. It was their way of life and survival. Do you know, to you as Adventist people, now this can be as well to the rest of y'all, one of the greatest pieces of information I ever read in Mrs. White's writings, because she came from that background, she says where 3 to 5 families go into an area and set up a work. I'm going to tell you something. When I first read that statement, I says, wow. That just ran like over my spine. It is hard to find people that want to be a community. We become so independent of one another that we don't even care for one another anymore. And I'm going to tell you, you want me to get on my soapbox? I'll get right on top of that one. I want community. I want families. You don't have to agree with me in religion, but we can work together until we come into harmony with oneness. It's amazing. I've seen this. I lived amongst the Amish people. Y'all know who the Amish people are? You know, when I moved there, these people came to me and says, Ron, you know how to homestead better than we've ever lived. And I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you the facts. We were more prepared to live completely independent than they were. One of the things I learned by these people, I learned it back in my hippie years as well, not as well, because we were doing stupid. But when I lived amongst these people, not to be one of them, but to live amongst them, I learned what community meant. When my time is up and I'm going to talk to you until midnight. When we bought this old farm, just one piece of example. I bought this farm and this house. Let me tell you something. The wind went from the north, through the house, out the south, out the west, and out the east. And we could not keep that house warm. I don't care how red hot the stove was. but we were willing to sacrifice everything we had to make this work. I put my family through things I'm ashamed of to even talk about, but we were willing to step our foot out and do it. That community came to us, and I just went there and asked them if I could hire one or two of the guys to help me do some work on the house. It was too small. I had a growing family. This community came out, and my brain was going back to the old days. 15 buggies pull up, tied up along the fence, and these men didn't have one power tool. You know where their power tool was? Right here. Right here. They chopped the top of my house off, shoot, like that, and put a 2-story top on top of it. It was dried in by the end of that day. That's what community means. And I long in my spirit. You have no idea. I long for that. Church spirit, as well as people that can work together. God knows, I'd pour my life into y'all because I know what's coming. Community, yes. We need to understand each other. We need to know. We need to love one another enough to where we look out for each other. Yeah. I get very emotional about these things because it's a very tender spot.
I notice you have no weeds at all on your potatoes.
We're completely 100% organic. We use 0 chemicals anywhere. And so, maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. But yes, we have no weeds. I'm going to tell you something. 1 year of keeping your garden clean is 5 years of less work. 2 years of keeping your garden clean is 10 years of less work. Within 15 years, I don't think we have that long, within 15 years you'll have a weed-free garden.
Tell them what happens when you don't keep it out.
But if you do not be as diligent about those weeds as you are about sin, it takes one crop of weeds to ruin those 5 years, to ruin those 10 years, to ruin those 15 years. One neglect. When you're feeling sorry, you know where you belong? In the field. Your dependency of your food crop, you do not want those weeds stealing the nutrients that's supposed to go into your food crop. So guess where you are? You want to start learning, sweetheart? Get you a little garden. Get you a little piece of ground. Get you some good books about how to grow, there's all kinds of really nice information out there. And before you ever get to the homestead, and I really hope you do, you can come up to Kentucky way and create community. But start learning how to grow and stay diligent with it. Don't get lazy about it when it's 100 degrees out here and the humidity's another, and so you've got 115 degrees in your field and you're sweating like crazy and you feel miserable and you are miserable. It's no time to just shut down and not go out there and do what you need
Our
to do.
top of the south is winter gardening. We know how to grow summer garden.
winter garden.
It's hard, it's hard to get motivated to get out in the wintertime, but
Like down here, are you living here in this area? I don't like to garden in the winter either, but I do. I don't know if we're going to get to it or not, but I know they have a friend of mine coming down here. We came out of the hippie, well, he doesn't want me to tell you all that, but we came out of the hippie movement about the same time together. He's going to be talking about high tunnel production, all right? I'm still digging carrots right now. I'm still digging lettuce. I'm cutting lettuce. I'm still digging beets. We're growing a large amount in there, and what we grew through the summer months, we dried, we preserved, and we put up. And, we love soups in the wintertime. And so Chris makes these vegetable soups, and all that stuff comes out of those bottles and bags and places that she has them. And we're able to have good fresh food. And I go under my crawl space or my place where I store, and we have all this fresh produce. And so we're going to talk about all those things. Winter months, you don't have to be outside out here gardening. If you had a high tunnel, you could grow all the food and fresh stuff you want that you've grown through the summer that's going to carry you as the cooked food program. But you can have fresh vegetables out of that high tunnel all winter long. And it's not hard work. It's actually fun to go out there and get in a t-shirt when it's 5 degrees out there. That's the truth. I can go out work in my high tunnel when it's winter outside, even if there's snow on the ground. I can go out into that high tunnel and enjoy being out there doing whatever I do. Yeah, we will try to talk about some of those things.
Got a group of us come and visit you.
Sure.
Field trip.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Where's your farm?
It's in Kentucky. It's 5.5 hours north.
What part of Kentucky?
You know where Glasgow, Kentucky is? Put it on that thing, and it'll take you right to Glasgow, Kentucky. We're just about 20 minutes east of the town of Glasgow. Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice country location. One of the things I liked about Kentucky, I don't know what it is down here. We left Tennessee. Tennessee was just going crazy. And it kind of looks like what's going on around this country down here. But it just went crazy. And I told my wife, I said, I've had enough of this. All these Californians, I'm a Californian, by the way. All these Californians moving in here, I turned into a Tennessee boy. Alan's a Southern boy, and I wasn't, but I've become very Southern, and I began to really appreciate the country folk. I learned so many things from a lot of these country folks, it's unbelievable. I could write a book on it. And so we left Tennessee because Kentucky is about 1 million, I think almost 1 million to 2 million less people population. Same land mass, but about 2 million, I think it's about 2 million people less in the state of Kentucky. That's why we started looking in Kentucky. So, if you want to get out of a highly populated area, come to Kentucky.
What, in your experience of gardening in so many states or in several states, what is the biggest challenge of moving from state to state and gardening according to the new state, the new land?
Well, I haven't moved very far from state to state. I would love to go back out west, but I can't stand the politics. And so I've stayed here. I'll be honest with y'all, I hate those summers around here. And it's hotter down here than it is up there. And I sweat something horrible. And my eyes get to burning because I sweat and I can't keep a headband on long enough without it just dripping in my face anyway. So the humidity I've never got used to. But I've stayed here mainly for one reason. Is you all have a long growing season. And it means everything to a homesteader. everything.
Exactly.
You have a long growing season. You can do spring production, summer production, fall production, and winter production. And we are doing that. We have been doing it. We've only been on this place for 1 year, where we're at right now. And we're right in the process of getting it to where it's starting to work, comfortable. It's going to take a lot more work, but that's okay. I'd rather have that kind of work. So, my personal opinion is, if you can stand the hot summers, you have such a growing season that you can grow year-round, literally. Yeah. I know people that are living way up far north, way up far north, way up in the cold country, and they grow food year-round. Wisconsin. I know people up in Canada. Yeah.
Just a quick question. I know you mentioned about the shelter, you mentioned about the water and the food. What about the land itself? What do you look in the land? Do you look for?
When we talk about shelter,
Is that part of it?
we're going to talk about the land, the lay of the land, how it looks, how it acts. You don't want to get me into that tonight. But we're going to talk about that because it's very important to understand when you go to buy something that you're not buying a piece of junk that's going to be a nightmare. If you have money, I'm going to tell you right here now, you better spend it on something nice. At least something that's workable. Don't throw your money away by buying a piece of junk because it's cheap. You will pay the price if you do. And we also, another thing we're going to talk about, she aggravated this, about community. And I'm going to just lay it on you. We have got to learn to work together. I said it earlier. We've all grown up in this system, predominantly. Some of us didn't. But we've all grown up in this system of being independent. There is a saying in my brain that says, yeah, I like independence, but I like codependence. You know what that means? You have your independent unit, but you have a codependence on your community. We're going to need that big time. One of the things when we deal with community, and hopefully I won't have to bring this up again tomorrow, is that there's going to be some folks that can't afford to get out. They're not going to be able to afford to have a piece of land. They're barely going to be able to afford to get out. What are we going to do with those kind of people? Do you hear me? You're either gonna be a real neighbor or you're not. I know of a lot of folks. I've got a brother struggling to get out of California right now. He feels trapped. And I said something to him, and I told him I'm only going to say it once. A lot of us are going to be facing this kind of stuff. And I told him, I said, kid, you want to get out of California? I got a piece of land you can come and live on. I'll help you build a cabin. It's going to take your money to do it. But I'll help you build a place to where you have a place in the shelter of this storm coming. To those that have means, I beg of you, use that means to bless your neighbors. Community? Yeah. This goes beyond just being a community. We are going to have to be a shelter in the storm to those that are struggling just to how to survive this thing. You hear me? I don't know where y'all are at. And I really don't know where your barometer is. But I am deeply convicted in my heart that something's coming big. Bigger than we've ever seen. And I just hope and pray, by the grace of God, that we can make it through this storm that's coming. I know that's sobering, but it needs to be sobering. We need to be on our knees, and if you're not a praying person, I pray that you learn to pray. Because we're going to need help in what task we have ahead of us. So, any other questions?
I don't have a question. I just want to say, all of us who are here, let's think about this seriously. And of course, also to make a little group, 2, 3 family or so, 5 if it's possible, to get together and get out in the right place, in the right time. And as we go there, we can grow our own food. I have a piece of land here, and early in the spring, the summer, I have strawberries. And boy, my grandchildren enjoy them, we all do. Before the strawberries are over, my blueberries start to ripe. And we have blueberries for a long season. And I pick up 2 gallons every other day of blueberries. Very healthy, very powerful antioxidants in blueberries. Before blueberries are finished, my blackberries start ripening. So that's also for a season. Before the blackberries are finished, my figs start to ripe. But I have 5 different kind of figs, and they are not all at the same time. They kind of like last longer. And before the figs start to win out away, my persimmon trees, fruit start to ripe. And persimmon tree I have also 5 different kinds. That one start to ripe earlier in the summer, and some of them late. The leaves are down. The frost came and killed the leaves, but the fruits are still on the trees. Yeah. Not quite ripe yet. And they stay there, and frost comes after frost. They are still there happy, and they are not damaged by the frost. This kind of persimmon.
They actually get sweeter.
Yes.
They get really sweet with the frost.
So we can learn how to grow food every season to have our own fresh fruits, not Walmart, not any food store, but our own garden. And we eat them organically for sure, and healthy and for free. And you know what? Once you plant those trees, you don't have to work hard like for tomatoes, because they are there for years and decades. So before probably we die, the trees are probably still there producing fruits and for other generations. So when we start to do gardening, you know what? God will bless us in such a way that we'll enjoy and we'll not have to work so hard every year to grow fruits, because they are there already growing.
You know, that's one thing you all have down here. If you stay in this territory or this country, and I hope you don't. But if you do, you have a really amazing growing season down here for fruit production. You really do. Now I want to say something in closing, because I've gone too long already. I want to encourage all of you. Get together with friends. Communicate one with another. Put your energy together. And if you're wanting to learn how to do gardening, get together with a few friends. Plow up your backyard, whatever it is, and start learning how to, grow things. Because it'll be a good step. That's how I started, honestly. I grew up in the city. I didn't know nothing. But I took a little piece of land, and I got the ground all tore up, and then I started growing a little garden. And when I saw it growing, it excited me. And over the years, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I want to just encourage you. So if you feel overwhelmed, get together with a few friends, maybe even a few enemies, and start learning some of these ideas or techniques and start moving in that direction. All right.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to bring to your attention how to follow up on this seminar. Ron mentioned just a little bit about what we plan for the future. In April 28th, we would like to have on that weekend a couple from Tennessee that will teach us in a more practical way in regards to the question how we can garden in the winter, how to have a greenhouse or a tunnel, how it's called. A greenhouse where you can actually have fresh produce throughout the winter. And even more, I'd like to extend to you the invitation, because it seems to be such an interesting topic, how we can come together as a homesteading community. And if you have any experience in gardening, in canning, in raising fruits, growing fruits, or any of this kind, please sign up at the exit when you go out, so then we can connect each other, stay in touch, and when we have activities of this kind, we can spread easier the word, but also we can use your expertise and what you've been through to share with each other. So at this time, I'd like to thank all of you. Just remember, our next meeting will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. And the topic will be securing the right shelter location. And I think for me, that's one of the most important parts of all this aspect, knowing what type of land and what the land needs to have. Followed by 3 o'clock, securing the good water source, which I think it has to be part of choosing the right land. And then in the evening, we'll conclude this series with preparing and optimizing and securing your food source. Not being the least, but also one very important topic. So at this time, we are all dismissed. I'd like to dismiss you with a prayer. If you can all stand and just have a prayer. Father in heaven, we are so grateful for all this day we spent learning, and we are thankful for everybody that's here this evening. We ask you blessings on our way home. Protect each one of us and help us tomorrow refreshed so we can come together and learn more. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you once again.